start at 9 in the morning. By 2, I'm done.
That's how I,
Morning, John.
nuts.
No, actually, I was sitting in dispatch.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, and I'm trying to work my way back and can breathe now at least. So I feel some better, but I'm physically just not strong at all. It's just sad. Yeah, go in and work a half a day and look like
No, it's 9 o'clock. We're waiting for everybody else to come in.
That's how I get.
pushed.
Oh, shit.
We were standing outside watching.
I told Barb, I said, this ain't gonna be. Yeah.
Are we ready? All right, here we go. All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Today's date, Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. All commissioners are present, along with county auditor, county coordinator, and representation from the county attorney's office. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any amendments to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have to amend the agenda to add the board action for emergency relief. Is that correct? Is that how it's called?
Declaration of emergency.
Doing that at 11:02? Is that right?
That'd be great, thank you.
Declaration of emergency, right?
Yep.
Okay. And did you say you had one other? No?
No, just
No? Okay, anyone else? Otherwise, I'd look for a motion to approve the agenda with the amendment. Motion by Kircher, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Consent,
Consent items today are the meeting minute approval for May 3rd, 2022. The hire of full-time Assistant County Attorney 1, Alex Meyer, start date to be determined. Resignation, Public Health Nurse Angel Carnes, 4/29/2022. Appoint Social Worker Amanda St. Aubin, start date to be determined. Appoint Support Enforcement Aide Seth Martinson, start date 7/5/2022. Appoint part-time intermittent home health aide homemaker Trista Medcalf, start date to be determined.
okay, you've heard and seen the potential consent items. Looking for a motion to approve.
So move.
Motion by Newman, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kneisel, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Auditor Treasurer,
First item I have today is the Commissioner Warrants. Background is sent for review. The recommendation is to approve the Commissioner Warrants with an ACH and a manual payment totaling in the amount of $160,024.71.
okay, you've seen the board action in regards to the commissioner warrants totaling $160,024.71. Looking for a motion to approve. Motion by Kircher. There's second.
Second.
Second by Kneisel. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Commissioner Kircher? Yes. Commissioner Kneisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson?
Yes.
The next item I have is the Health and Human Service Commissioner Warrants. Background is sent for your review. Recommendation is to approve the Health and Human Service Commissioner Warrants with an ACH and a manual payment totaling in the amount of $97,142.32.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Health and Human Services Commissioner warrants totaling $97,142.32. Looking for a motion to approve.
So move.
Motion by Becker, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Newman. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Commissioner Becker?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Commissioner Kneisel?
Yes.
Commissioner Kircher? Yes. Commissioner Erickson?
Yes.
Last item I have then today is the Health and Human Service SSIS warrants. Our background is sent for your review. Recommendation is to approve the Health and Human Service SSIS warrants with an ACH and a regular manual payment totaling in the amount of $55,789.53.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Health and Human Services SSIS warrants totaling $55,789.53. Looking for a motion to approve. Motion by Kircher. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker. Discussion. Hearing none. Roll call.
Commissioner Kircher. Commissioner Becker.
Yes.
Commissioner Kneisel.
Yes.
Commissioner Newman.
Yes.
Commissioner Erickson.
Yes. Public Works. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning, everyone. Our one item on the agenda this morning for Public Works is a request for approval of State of Minnesota Master Partnership Contract Agreement 1050337. So the background with this is a master partnership agreement that all counties sign with MnDOT. So the counties and MnDOT can work together and bill each other for services rendered. We typically don't use this a lot as far as emergency type situations, but we do use this when MnDOT does some testing of materials for us when they certify concrete box culverts, pipes, and asphalt and other gravel work that we have them test for at their district labs. So with that being said, it's basically every 5 years we get this approval, and the 5 years is up this year. So our options are to approve the attached resolution and agreement, or do not approve that. And our recommendation at this time is to approve the attached resolution and agreement number 1050337.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the State of Minnesota Master Partnership Contract, looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Newman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kneisel. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. County Assessor, good morning, Chris.
I'm here today to request a potential reschedule of the County Board of Appeal and Equalization. Right now, we have 16 people that are scheduled to attend the board, and we schedule them in 15-minute allotments, which from 6 o'clock current start time, our last appointment is currently scheduled at 10:30 p.m. So I listed a couple options there, to request the meeting to be started at an earlier time or to do not change the meeting time. I'm recommending that we reschedule the meeting to begin at 4 p.m. on January 14th, 2022.
I believe you stated January, but we'll go with June.
Let's do it in June.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. I'll open it up for discussion ahead of time. Personal opinion, I think we have people available earlier, and there's nothing in the statute that limits us from starting it earlier. It's just the late part that you have to
We
go
have
through a
to
certain time.
have appointments available until at least 7 p.m., which is not a problem. But yeah, there is nothing to state that we can't begin at an earlier time. That being said, there's also nothing stating that we can't begin, recess, and reopen on a different day too. If you want to use that as an option, we could continue the 6 p.m. start time, recess at a time of your choosing, and begin at a different date that is at least June 30th. We have to be done with the entire session by June 30th.
Commissioners, I'm looking for input, so.
You already got scheduled people lined up for dates.
Correct.
So I don't think we should change a date on anybody. I will go ahead with 4 o'clock, fine,
You think the 4 would be a better scenario?
Yeah, I think so.
yeah.
I agree. I don't have
Better earlier than late, Dave?
You won't have problems finding people to fit in those appointed times, or?
No, the last half a dozen people or so, we told them that potentially we would be moving. We have everybody's phone number that is currently scheduled, so we will call and make it work. Potentially.
Or during the meeting, we could reschedule it at a different date
Yep, and you wouldn't need to do that ahead of time. If at a certain point in the meeting you want to be done, we can recess and resume at a different time. If we have people sitting here, it'd be nice to, have that appointment for them, but.
If there's more added to your agenda, then we need to determine whether how late we want to go and
Correct.
if we want to change, add another day or something. too.
Yep.
Do we need to do that before that actual day, or can we do it on that day?
As a courtesy, if we wanted to, I could shut down appointments at, say, 9 o'clock at night and then have them scheduled and then come back to the board in case we have people. Or if we want to set up a secondary date today, we could do that as well.
Right now, with the 4 o'clock start time, you're predicting what amount of time with the 15 minute?
4.5 hours, so 8:30.
8:30, 9 o'clock.
And you could potentially start earlier than 4, too.
Correct.
I'm open to a motion.
Well, I'm just thinking, Mr. Chair, past experiences, it tends to go a little longer than we think, because discussions are gonna take place with each individual. So, I think their 4-hour time limit is maybe being a little
Potentially.
later than that with the,
I guess it would just depend on how late you want to go.
The only thing is I hate to have someone scheduled at 9 o'clock and they sit here for 2 hours and then recess it on them and not even see them, and that's not a good scenario either.
Correct. Yeah, right.
Right, I agree.
not willing to go 10, 11 o'clock, I don't care.
Yeah,
Get it
it's-
over with, we get it over with.
that's fine with me too, I don't care.
Just do the earlier start time and go with what we got to go with. All right, looking for a motion at that point. I think we want a motion for this, correct? For the
Correct.
early start
Yep.
time?
I'll make a motion, we start at 4 o'clock.
Okay, we have a motion by Kneisel to start the County Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting at 4 PM. Is there a second? Second by Kircher. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Ditch Egg. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning.
Seems like a long time no see.
Okay, I just have one agenda item today. It's the County Ditch 22 Hold Harmless Agreement for ditch maintenance. Recommendation, the Todd County Board of Commissioners approves the following by motion. Acting as ditch authority, approves a hold harmless agreement petition from Mason and Roger Stender to clean approximately 2,005 feet of lateral 2 on County Ditch 22 on parcel 1300-18600 in Iona Township, Section 19, and the project will be done at their own expense.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the hold harmless agreement for County Ditch 22. Looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Kneisel, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker, discussion.
Jared, do you have the, I
Yeah.
just want to show the road
Oh,
right
I'm
away.
sorry. Oh,
That's okay. On the map, so that's kind of what the ditch line looks like, the east-west and the north-south. So on the map, the east-west ditch is actually right on the edge of the road right-of-way of one of Iona Township's roads. And so the original spoil pile was on the north, but Stenders are probably going to work with Iona Township to put them on the south, which they're allowed to do because it's right-of-way, and reshape the right-of-way so the ditch isn't, so it's not a straight shot down to the ditch on that one. So just for your information, if you see the,
The river or the creek looks a little different today than it did when you took the picture. With a lot of rain.
you know, I mean, there was a lot of rain though, actually, before I went up there. So, yeah, I'm sure it does, but yeah. But anyway, if you go by there and notice they're putting spoil on the other side of the ditch, it's because they're working with Iona Township to put that in the right of way.
thank you. All right, I had a motion by Kneisel and a second by Becker. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Todd County Development. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. You guys, are you ready, Bob? Okay. We're handing out copies of our annual report. It's also posted on our website. And, yeah, we do an electronic copy of it also. Yeah, just want to say over the overall economy, the last 2 years are definitely challenging with everything going on with COVID-19. 2021, we worked more with business seeking grants for economic stability. And then 75% of our businesses that we worked with were either seeking federal, state, or local grant assistance. And this continued throughout the year. About 25% of our hours were actual SBDC hours, Small Business Development Center hours that we worked with. And basically, through SBDC, we worked through about a little over $1 million in financing through lenders and our loan fund. The revolving loan fund, we actually had 2 early payoffs last year, which was amazing on that. Businesses did really well. I don't know where the money came off early payoffs. I mean, it was money in the economy or grants, but we had 2 early payoffs, and actually we'll have another one here this month, which is good. And we're actively working with lenders on 2 different projects that we'll probably do within the next 2 months here, if all the numbers work out for those projects. On our website, we had little over 7,260 users in 2021, and that was really good. A little bit more for 2020, but most of the traffic came early in the year in 2021, people seeking grants, especially for the county grants. We also had our big 3 that we had for people logging in on our website were economic development programs, news and information, then also available sites for development, and that's our site selection part on our website. We completed a total of website redesign last year, and basically redid the logo and redid the website, and that came with our contract with Golden Shovel Agency. So we revamped the website, and that usually happens every 5 years, and that's done free. We basically go through and change what needs to be changed and keep it up to date. And we also work on a monthly update with the website with the gatekeeper service. That's included also with what we do. Key areas of work last year that we worked in were basically Todd County Relief Program, beginning of the year, child care, which is still ongoing. We're working on a child care center potentially at the West Campus, Centra Care. It's just a matter of just trying to get the numbers to work, and we're waiting. Actually, we should have within the next week or so. We've made some changes on our total layout of the facility, what we'd like to do, and also waiting for some numbers, construction numbers, what it would come back to renovate the facility, startup costs for equipment, and also ongoing costs. And we've had some interest from local businesses to help finance that project, which is good. Broadband, working with the Broadband Coalition. I've also been working with the telecoms. We have potential projects right now that'll be applied for through, one is in southeastern Todd County, and that'll serve the unserved areas down there. And there's also a challenge in through the Minnesota PUC, through 2 different provider groups to work on overturning LTD broadbands. Because LTD was awarded basically about 1/3 of Todd County in areas. And a lot of the providers won't go in there because technically it's federally funded. Also on Second Avenue Apartments, they opened last May. And that helped a lot as far as for workforce housing. Those were market rate apartments. But we still need to do some work on housing in the county here. I think the main area we need to focus on next is single-family housing. Maybe Stearns County is working on a housing program to help people get into housing, or to at least afford down payments. A lot of younger people have college debt. A lot of people don't have the money for the down payments, so we're working with I talked to Stearns County there, how they're working on theirs, and that's a program they're introducing down there. And reporting for our corporation, usually for reporting, we report to Minnesota Department of Revenue for our taxes. We report to the Attorney General's office. We report to USDA for our loan fund, and Attorney General's for our loan fund, and also for our regular corporate needs, and then the Secretary of State. But overall, during the year, it's we're definitely keeping busy. I think the big thing with childcare, if we can get that moving, we can maybe get some, looking at state grants that may be coming out here in June. It's just a matter of getting the costs, you know, estimates, what's gonna cost to renovate that project. So, I think that's pretty much, unless you have, I can answer any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Rick, 2 years ago, they built that multi-housing unit up by Sennings there.
Yes.
How long did it take to fill that up, or is it full?
Oh, that filled right away.
Okay.
Yeah, Second Avenue Apartments,
How
that
many
filled
apartments are in there?
37.
37.
And that was, project took at least, it was 2.5, almost 3 years to do with that project.
What was the need for housing that it filled up that quick and that's that many units?
Right, we need market rate housing. The thing is, it's hard to get money through Minnesota Housing Finance Agency for market rate apartments. Everything's for subsidized. And especially, there's nothing out there for single-family housing, which I wish they would have, because building, single-family housing does two things. It builds tax base and it also builds communities, because people have a stake in the communities and they volunteer for things, they run for council, they do a lot of different things. So it's a matter of just trying to crack that nut like every other community is doing to bring in single-family housing, or find a developer willing to do it here.
I think it's good that you're working on the daycare issue also. It's I think, a considerable issue in our county, and has been for the major employers here in the city and the county. I also think the county itself, employees would are looking for daycare and things like that. So I think it's critical that you continue to work on that, and I know you have the economic board's full support on that. I hope it does develop into something where it does become something that we have, because we don't have it. So I think there's more daycares quitting because of all the restrictions put on them and so forth, so the opportunity to get daycare is pretty limited.
And we're hoping on the, if the numbers work, to, on the daycare center, to keep the cost down on it. That's the main thing. We can't charge metro prices, you know, because the wage level's down there and everything else. So it needs to be affordable to the people up here. But still, we have to pay. We found out that if you need to pay somebody, we're looking at $18, $20 an hour just to compete for employees. So that's kind of hard to work in the business model also.
Any other questions? Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Todd County Sheriff.
Good morning, all. Let's see here. Couple items today. First is, we are looking at the purchase of our Tahoes for replacement of squad cars. Background is the Sheriff's Office would like to purchase 5 2023 Chevy Tahoes from North Country GM of Hibbing. The price of the Chevy Tahoe is $39,160.30 on the state contract bid. Total for all squad cars would be $195,801.50. The 5 squads are budgeted item for the 2022 budget. Options, of course, are to approve the 5 Tahoes from North Country Hibbing. 2 is not to approve the purchase, and the recommendation, of course, is to approve the Tahoes for purchasing, and it is a budgeted item.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the
Can we
purchase.
have some discussion?
You sure can.
Okay. Steve, is this normal for us to purchase 5 of them at a time?
We normally get 4, but with the addition of the 2 people from last year, we got 1 rotation where we're getting caught up.
Okay, and so the used squad cars, what kind of mileage do they have on them, or what's the?
Roughly about 120-ish. right in there.
Yes.
That's what I was gonna ask.
They're telling us, but they told us this the last 3 years, that they're confident they can have them here by September, but like I said, they told us that the last 3 years, whether it be Ford or Chevy.
And did they appear on time?
No,
No.
not the last 3 years,
Right.
so.
So it could be such thing, you might get a couple? Or do you
Typically when they come in,
they'd get them all at once
we
or
go
none?
on, if we order them, they go in the queue, so when you get one, you typically get all of them
Okay.
at one crack, or within a week of each other.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any other questions, discussion? Otherwise, you've seen the board action for the request of the purchase of 5 Chevy Tahoe squad cars. Looking for a motion. Motion by Kircher. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Knizel. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you. Second item we got up is the joint powers agreement with the Financial Crimes Task Force. This is basically just a housekeeping deal. We just signed this not that long ago. Background is requesting the county to sign an updated Financial Crimes Task Force joint powers agreement with the state of Minnesota. The Sheriff's Office has been a member of the Financial Crimes Task Force since 2021. The updated agreement will replace the current agreement that will expire in March 30th of 2027. Just a little further background on that. What they're doing is, when Todd County joined, our agreement was good for 5 years. Hennepin County, if they joined 3 years ago, it's good for 5 years. They want to get everybody in the same schedule, so they only have to do this once every 5 years instead of the state having to do it every year because there's different agencies coming on board at different times. So that's pretty much what it's all about. So the options are to approve the updated Financial Crimes Task Force Joint Powers Agreement with the state of Minnesota, or do not approve. And of course, our recommendation is to approve the Financial Crimes Task Force. It says budget no, but there's no
No,
fee
no
to it.
financial.
Yeah, there's no financial implication.
All right, you've seen the board action for the updated Financial Crimes Task Force Joint Powers Agreement. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Newman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Emergency Management. Morning, Mike.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, board members. I bring to you today a resolution, proclamation for EMS Proclamation Week to designate the week of May 15th through the 21st as EMS Medical Services Week. Whereas emergency medical services are a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical service teams in Todd County are ready to provide life-saving care to all those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas emergency medical services have grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative maintenance, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas members of the emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, be resolved, the Todd County Board of Commissioners, in recognition of this event, hereby proclaim the week of May 15th through the 21st, 2022, as Emergency Medical Services Week, with the EMS strong theme, EMS Week, Raising to the Challenge. We encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We've heard the proclamation and looking for a motion to approve the week of the 15th through the 21st as EMS Medical Services Week.
I would like to make that motion.
Motion by Becker. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kneisel. Any discussion?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you to everyone.
And it's getting hard to get more EMS personnel, so.
Yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 11.2, Declaration of Emergency.
All right. The next item is a declaration of emergency from the storms of May 12th. Whereas the severe weather has impacted the population of Todd County and its cities, and whereas the severe weather event has caused significant amount of public property damage, and whereas Todd County Department of Emergency Management requests the Todd County Board of Commissioners to declare Todd County in a state of emergency for the May 12th event of 2022. Now therefore be resolved that Todd County Board of Commissioners declares the Todd County in a state of emergency for conditions resulting from the severe storm event, May 12th, 2022.
Okay, you've seen the board action and resolution declaring Todd County in a state of emergency for the storm event of May 12th, 2022. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Newman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Becker. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Policies Committee. Good morning, Sarah.
Morning. We bring up BAF and a resolution for a change to personnel policies, updating 4.04 and adding 4.05, and establishing the policy for Personnel Board of Appeals. The Policies Committee has worked to review and update the Personnel Policy, Article 4, Section 4.04, Grievance Procedure, and add 4.05, Personnel Board of Appeals, as well as establish the Personnel Board of Appeals policy for that board. Your options are to approve this resolution or to do not approve this resolution, with the recommendation to approve this resolution.
You've seen and heard the board action for the personnel policy update of 4.04 and adding 4.05 to establish policy for the Personnel Board of Appeals. Looking for a motion.
So,
Motion by Kircher. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Becker. Discussion?
Which one?
True.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The second board action the Policies Committee has is compensation for the members of the Personnel Board of Appeals. It shall be set by the county board, and each member shall be paid actual and necessary expenses per Minnesota Statute 375.65. Your options are to adopt the attached resolution or do not adopt the attached resolution, and this is establishing the per diem for the 3 members of the Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
Mileage will be paid at the federal rate.
It,
This is per diem. Per diem is paying for the monthly meeting. Mileage is separate.
Yep, nope, yeah, the answer was it's separate, yes. Go ahead, Barb, did you have some other add to it? No.
Other than,
Yep. Would you like to read that in, or is everybody comfortable with reading it on their own there? Personnel Board of Appeals per diem establishment. You're looking for us to set that dollar amount, is that correct?
Yep, there needs to be a dollar
You wanna
amount for.
add, input from the policy committee with the discussion as far as what we feel the chances of meeting at all are? And also the personnel may be involved. You wanna elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, from other counties, we have heard either this board has never met or has met rarely. We obviously prefer that they never meet, but there may be situations that they have to meet. And, when they meet, the potential is to meet for long periods of time or several times. So there's 3 members, and they have to understand the grievance and hear from witnesses and such. So when they meet, they're going to meet for a period of time. The Policies Committee, and Denise and Chris, if you can join in, the Policies Committee was, we don't have a recommendation. The number $150 was thrown out, but I don't think the Policies Committee made a decision on that. Obviously, the board decides. And you have been provided data on what our other volunteer boards get for per diems.
Mr. Chair, and if I might add, we also as a committee discussed that this board would probably be a board that we'd be seeking professionals that have either been in community health, been an HR manager, or in the HR field. So they're not status quo that they're a higher level, but they would be in that professional status too. So we always looked at that as a consideration as well when paying the per diem.
I think looking at the experience and the educational requirements, kind of as Denise is referring to, made us think that this should be set at a higher level. We did discuss the $150 per diem. In looking at the per diems that we currently have set for our boards, the highest we have set, it appears to be the Soil and Water Board at $125 per diem.
actually, Chris, we don't set that, they set their own.
They do, okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, the board has nothing to do with that,
Okay.
per diem.
And I did reach out to other counties. I got responses only from 2, but one of the counties, Meeker County, has their per diem, excuse me, for this board set at $100, and can't think of the other county right off the top of my head. The other one was $65 per diem. Don't know how long that's been set and if it's been, looked at every year.
Yes. Okay, we have a motion for $100 per diem for the Personal Board of Appeals. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Becker. Any further discussion? All in favor of $100, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Solid Waste. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. The BAF that is before you today is regarding the cell construction award bid. Fratellone Construction was the low bid for the project, coming in at $267,243.20. The cell construction is nearing its limit of lifespan, so we needed to get a bid to expand our construction cell for the landfill, and the award the project to Fratellone is what we're requesting before the board today. The current space available would last us probably till fall, and then we'd either have to cease operating the transfer station, or we award the project and move on so we can continue to use the landfill to serve Todd County.
Okay, I'm gonna open this up to discussion first, just if you have any questions or whatever before we
I
go
would
to a
like
motion.
to, because it's not budgeted, how do you plan on paying for it?
The budget, we usually receive an annual amount of around, on average, 110,000 per year for tipping fees, currently. So, right now, Chris McCon was handling the financial side of things. The
Oh, look at there.
You're doing great, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for starting us off. I apologize for not being here at the beginning. So Commissioner, like Mike was saying, the tipping fees of 110,000 per year is exclusively for the demolition waste that is brought to us. One unique thing about our department is because we're an enterprise fund, we actually carry an account balance from previous years, and we have those funds available from that. So, you know, ideally, this should have been in the capital improvement plan budgeted last year, but that doesn't really change how we do the business, because that expense, you know, we don't budget for that year's expenses. We like to do a project like this that serves 7 or 8, or in this case, 6.5 years. So we make that expense and then utilize that asset throughout its life.
And that answered my question, because my question, when I saw the tipping fees, was whether or not that was tipping fees strictly for this department, or if that was tipping fees for the other, which I knew was much larger dollars anyway, so, yep. Any other questions?
Not a question, just a comment that this is definitely the lowest bid. There was quite a bit lower than the other ones that we had, so.
Yeah, I think they were actually quite competitive. Was it 12, 15,000 maybe to the next lowest or something?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, they were listed on there, but it's not a huge gap.
No.
No, and the price per
Oh, yeah.
cubic yard was very competitive. It was, I thought we did we were lucky on that estimate.
Yeah, it was $2.20 a cubic yard, which is a very good price.
Nice. And not contingent on fuel pricing or anything of the sort?
Mr. Chair, if I may, Chris, Mike, how much lifespan is left out there?
You mean like total lifespan?
Right. So if you look at the real estate we have, you know, you could have 50 years. So the MPCA keeps us on a short leash. So what we're proposing to build is all of the airspace that is permitted for us to build. But there's already plans shared with the MPCA of a larger area, but they don't like to give you the freedom to build 50 years of airspace all at once.
Good question. Any other questions, discussion? Otherwise, I would be looking for a motion to approve the construction bid as presented for the development of the landfill.
So moved.
Motion by Kneisel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Newman. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. First item here is Derek Holst's request for a conditional use permit. An application for conditional use permit submitted on April 8th to establish a cabinet construction shop on parcel 25006100, which is Fullard Township. The request was reviewed by the Planning Commission during the May 5th meeting, and the final recommendation was to grant the conditional use with the following conditions. 1, that all waste materials such as paint, stains, solvents must be disposed according to applicable state and local requirements. And 2, that the applicant must abide by all other applicable federal, state, and local standards. The action would be a motion to grant the conditional use with those proposed conditions, to deny the CUP or remand it back to the Planning Commission, And the recommendation at this time would be to grant the CUP with the 2 conditions.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Derek Holt's request for the CUP. Excuse me, looking for a motion to approve.
So move.
Motion by Becker. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Newman. I'm sorry, did I miss it when I was coughing? Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, next is Coon Point preliminary plat, an application for subdivision to create 2 non-riparian lots in shoreline GD zoning on parcel 15003870 in Leslie Township was submitted on April 12th. The application was reviewed by the Planning Commission during the May 5th public hearing. The final recommendation from the Planning Commission is to grant approval of the preliminary plat with the following conditions. 1, that the developer and future property owners must obtain appropriate permitting when necessary from other governmental agencies, including but not limited to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Sauk River Watershed District. 2, that all driveway access must be approved by the road authority. And 3, the site is located in an agricultural district, and consequently, there will be from time to time sight, sounds, and smells associated with the operation of farming. No lot owner shall bring action of law against any farming operation because of such farming activities, as long as such farming activities complies with state, federal, EPA, and Todd County ordinances. The option would be to approve the preliminary plat with those proposed conditions, deny the preliminary plat, or remand it back to the Planning Commission. And the recommendation this time would be a motion to approve the preliminary plat with the 3 conditions.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Coon Point preliminary plat. Looking for a motion.
I'll move for discussion.
Motion by Newman for which option? Motion to approve with conditions?
I'd like to table the damn thing, but I just move for discussion. Approve with the conditions.
Okay,
Let's do
motion
that.
to approve with conditions by Newman. Is there a second? Second by Kircher. Discussion.
Well, I'd like to table it. Adam had sent me the preliminary, or kind of a preliminary, or a heads up on 4/8, which I sent to the township and said, hey, keep an eye on this plat that's coming through. I sent it to the clerk of Leslie Township and the chair of Leslie Township. At the 4/19 board meeting, I had told Adam that our subdivision ordinance showed developer must meet with the township board in a pre-application meeting or ordinance 501. On 4/21, I got an email from the clerk of Leslie Township saying that they have not heard from the applicants as far as asking the road authority what they could do or what they couldn't do before the preliminary. So my question, Adam, is if we have a pre-application meeting and it states in our ordinance, prior to preparation of the preliminary plat, subdividers or owners must meet with the Todd County zoning administrator or other appropriate officials, including the township board, in order to be made fully aware of all applicable ordinances, regulations, and plans in the area to be subdivided. Now, I keep bringing this up, and I feel like I'm a broken record, but damn it, the townships are the road authority. And they have a say in what we're doing. And I feel really uncomfortable, even if it's a preliminary, because if it was a preliminary, the township should already be involved in this. And they're telling me, and I called the chairman last night and said, Doug, have you guys heard anything on this? No. And that's telling me, it's like, okay, why?
So our application period, when we had, at the previous board meeting, when this was discussed, did not have any requirements in the application. The ordinance says it. So since then, We have actually edited our application to include a date and a signature from the township board, so it's signed when they hand it to us. We were in the middle of that application period at that time. So from there going forward, our applications are now edited to include that piece of it in the application phase.
Well, are these
So-
applications, are these subdividers or applicants being told that they need to go to the township board meeting or set up an appointment with the township board?
We have always included that as part of our dirt team review, figuring we kill two birds with one stone. We bring the preliminary plat to the township directly, include them in that dirt team review meeting, so we're taking care of this on behalf of the applicant to make it easy. A lot of times, the applicant goes to the township, reviews this, and then we call a dirt team meeting, and we're talking about the same things over again. So we've always just included this as a combined meeting. I did, on the day I sent you that preliminary plat, sent that to the township myself. The next week, we received the application, so they received the public notice. I called the township the week prior, during the week of the meeting, prior to the meeting, to try to get input from them and never received a call back. I made extra effort through this process to try to get information from the township and never got a call back from them. Going forward, it's part of our application process, so we wouldn't even accept the application going forward.
But
in
they're
scenarios like
answering
this.
me.
I can't answer to that. I called the township, left a message, and never received a response back.
I don't know, it's just, you know, our ordinance states in there that they should be involved from the get-go.
And that's why we,
It's gotta change.
and that's why we made the edits to the application. It's in there now, it's a requirement, it needs to be filled out in that application before we accept it. We were in the middle of an application period at the time, so we didn't change the or use that new application until after the application deadline for this particular meeting. And now for the next meeting, we don't have any plats, but going forward, that's a requirement of the application.
So in that situation, Adam, is that gonna be the responsibility then of the plat developer person for them to make contact with the
Right.
township?
Yep, they need
Because right
to-
now, I think we're trying to do some of their work for them.
Yep.
And it's evidently not working out with response necessarily. Some townships respond very well, some
Others don't.
tend not to.
So we
Yes,
included this in the application and put it on the applicant to make contact with those townships.
in the future.
Get a signature, or at least identify the date they met with the township. The township can choose to sign and say, yep, they were here. But at a minimum, we should be able to take the date they put on the application, ask for the minutes from the township, and be able to compare the notes and know that they were there.
Right. Because I think coming from the planning commission side of things, when we're reaching out as a dirt team and everything else, and we're getting responses from all the others involved with the dirt team, and we're not getting responses from the township, that makes it really hard.
Right.
And so if you don't get a response, you take it for granted that they don't have a concern.
The other problem, if I could, Mr. Chair, is working with townships is they only have one meeting once a month, and they would break the meeting law if they would call back and forth between the supervisors. There's only 3 supervisors, and that's where you have part of the problem, is they can't really discuss anything until they have their meeting. If this comes right the day or 2 after their meeting, they won't meet or be able to discuss it for another. But at the same token, a clerk could say, well, our next meeting is such and such a date, please attend at that
There
time.
could be a communication
You know,
line.
so there could be a communication that way, but.
There could be.
And
That's exactly the way we feel, and,
I guess my other comment is, Adam, my recommendation is that you send notification to every member of the township.
Yes,
Not just to the clerk or whatever, but every member of the township.
Okay, and we'll send public notices that way, because we don't have all their emails, so it'll have to be via mail. Sure, we'll include
Usually-
the 5 or 6.
Addresses on the township officer list.
We have the list in our office from
The other thing is,
Denise.
I think Burkesdale has 5 supervisors.
5.
So that's the only township I think that has that.
That's it.
But, I just recommend that you send it to all of them because maybe there is a lack of communication within the township.
Okay.
all right, any other discussion? Otherwise, we had a motion from Newman, second by Kircher, to approve with conditions. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, Birch Lake Hills Second Edition preliminary plat, an application for subdivision to create 2 non-riparian lots in Shoreland RD zoning on parcels 0300-22301 and 0300-22302, Birchdale Township. Was submitted on April 12th. The application was reviewed by the Planning Commission during the May 5th meeting, and the final recommendation was to grant approval of the preliminary plat with one condition, that the developer and future property owners must obtain appropriate permitting when necessary from other governmental agencies, including but not limited to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Sauk River Watershed District. The option B to approve the preliminary plat with the proposed conditions, deny the preliminary plat, or amend it back to the Planning Commission. And the recommendation would be a motion to approve the preliminary plat with the one condition. On this one, I did have a conversation with the township board member. They had a chance to discuss it at a meeting, and they had 0 concerns.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Birch Lake Hills Second Edition preliminary plat. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Newman to approve with conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Second by Kircher. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, and lastly, Pine Tree Acres preliminary plat, an application for subdivision to create a single non-riparian lot in Shoreland RD zoning on parcel 14001600, Candona Township, was submitted on April 12th. The application was reviewed by the Planning Commission during the May 5th meeting, and the final recommendation from the Planning Commission was to grant approval of the preliminary plat with the following conditions. 1, developer and future property owners must obtain appropriate permitting when necessary from other governmental agencies, including but not limited to Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and Sauk River Watershed District. 2, all driveway accesses must be approved by the road authority and shall only be connected to Akeley Drive. And 3, the site is located in an agricultural district, and consequently there will be, from time to time, sights, sounds, and smells associated with the operation of farming. No lot owner shall bring action of law against any farming operation because of such farming activities, as long as such farming activity complies with state, federal, EPA, and Todd County ordinances. The option would be to approve the preliminary plat with those proposed conditions, deny the preliminary plat, or amend it back to the Planning Commission. And the recommendation would be a motion to approve the preliminary plat with these 3 conditions. And I was actually sat down with a township board member on this one in our office, and then they also attended the meeting, and their only concern was that the driveway access come off of Akeley, so there's not more accesses along the back, I think it's Bass Trail or something, where there's no cul-de-sac. So to reduce traffic along that road, they requested that we connect it just to Akeley Drive.
Okay, you've seen the board action for the Pine Tree Acres preliminary plat. Is there a motion?
So moved with conditions.
Motion by Newman with conditions. Is there a second? Second by Kircher. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Fourteen, 15, commissioners.
Yes, Mr. Chair. After the 419 board meeting and the residents that had showed up to that meeting, I heard a lot of comments that they felt like they wasted their time coming to the meeting. We weren't listening. We weren't really concerned. And my concern is since 2012, we went from about 213, 214 employees. I think right now we're at 235 plus, I think. So my concern right now would be to do a couple-year hiring freeze until we find out, and hopefully the economy will straighten out a little bit. Everything's pretty nuts out there. Farmers can't get in the field. This last storm, you put bad to worse. And I just want to show the constituents of the county that we are concerned.
Okay, I'm just gonna open it up for discussion, if anybody has input or whatever the case may be.
So your recommendation for a hiring freeze is not to fill vacancies?
It says implement a hiring freeze on all new employees.
Well, replacements, and then you'd have to justify the replacement. I mean, I could read the resolution into that if you want to vote on it.
Well, I just think the full board needs to understand the ramifications of what this means. Understandable, the board is concerned about our taxes. That's why we have a budget committee and set our budgets with the department heads and go through that. Of course, we have 6 unions that we have to negotiate with, maybe 7, I think it's 6 now.
It's 6.
That we have to negotiate with, and of course, we end up, some are binding arbitration with us when we get into a predicament with the unions that we negotiate with. My concern is I look at the, I don't disagree that we need to look at things seriously. My concern is when I look at the consent agenda, and I look at Coordinator Pelzer's weekly update, the list of interviews and replacements that we're trying to do and get and fill is long. We struggle to just replace employees, so it's concerning me that we would just stop hiring altogether hiring, so that's why I'm concerned about the meaning of this. I'm not opposed to saying we need to seriously slow down and take a look at replacements or new hirees. The sheriff now has a discussion on 2 full-time dispatchers where he gave us the call status and things like that. And so does that mean that we don't? I brought this up before when we hired a part-time employee for the treasurer's office. Didn't sink in. We passed it. I said we should have been concerned at that point. And now we're concerned after we have a meeting with a bunch of citizens who want to tell us that it was truly about valuations. They don't know what their taxes are going to be yet. Randy, I just had a cabin sell by me for $600-some thousand. Ridiculous. What people are paying.
I agree. I agree.
And then we get accused of the valuations, which isn't our issue, it's the state puts that in our formula. So when people are paying that kind of money for a home, it's a lake home, I just don't understand this. Are we as commissioners supposed to be blamed for that? What these people are paying for these homes? So, I want to know what the full meaning of this means before I think we should maybe have a committee with the finance committee and the coordinator discuss this before it comes back to the board to be voted on.
Okay. And my other concern, Commissioner, is our population hasn't changed that much in our county in the last 20-some years. And we just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger at the county level. And, you know, when I was a kid, when I grew up, you know, we had 1 sheriff and 2 deputies patrolling the whole damn county. So, yeah, maybe things have changed, but still, you think about that, it's concerning. You know, and what people are paying out there, yeah, it's asinine, but you know, that bubble could burst too, and it could go the other way really quickly.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes.
I would like to implement something like this, and maybe instead of putting a hiring freeze, put a hiring slowdown I think that and I brought this up a few years ago too, I thought, this has got to start coming in front of the board with justification of hiring, a little bit more intense than maybe what we're doing now. Because we're going to have to start slowing down. And I realize some of these positions are funded other than county tax dollars, should we say. So as we're looking towards hiring, that has to come into justification of this. But I do think we have to let the people know, our constituents know, that we do take what they're telling us very serious, and to move on like that. And I would even make the motion, and I don't know if you want to change the word freeze to slow down on this, but I would like to move this forward. So,
We just have it open for discussion at this point.
okay.
And I guess I would just like to add, because we had discussion on this at the Personnel Committee level, and I certainly don't disagree with Randy, Commissioner Newman's perspective on what we're talking about here, and yet I certainly understand where Commissioner Kircher is coming from. I think we have in place a process that brings any new hires in front of the Personnel Committee first, and then from there we decide on if it's gonna come to a board, whatever I'm trying to say, work session first or not, or if it's gonna come directly to board. And then at board level, we have a chance to say no already. So if you're concerned about hiring, your voice is here. And I don't have a problem with that by any means, but I'm not sure what we're gonna succeed with trying to write it differently when you already have control from the board level. There's no new hires coming through unless it comes through here.
Well, it comes through the Finance Committee. I know they are required to bring to the Finance Committee if there's any new additional hires.
Correct. Yep, through finance,
So
through
that's where
personnel,
it starts. It goes from finance to personnel.
from personnel to work session or board.
Yep,
And so there's nothing sneaking through.
no. But we just,
Mr.
just
Chair,
like to
if I
send
may
that
add,
message.
and I think you're kind of stating what was typed in the now therefore be resolved. Implement a hiring freeze on all new employees in county departments with the exceptions. When we're accepting that, we're saying positions that are vacated, department head shall justify to the Personnel Committee and the board in granting, so it's to recruit that position. So it's saying a hiring freeze, but yet it's still saying anything that's vacated will still follow the steps that you're talking about.
Which we're already doing.
Right.
And Mr. Chair, that's by policy, our
Yes.
policy. That's what we're doing. And I do want to say, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think the board has done a very good job in taking very close look at every single hire that comes before you. I think you've taken very careful consideration in the needs of the county and being very responsible in the hires that we've done.
And to me, this is just implementing and restating that we are concerned about what's going on out there. We are concerned about taxes and the spending of the county.
To me, Mr. Chair, this should have came to a work session before it come to the county board, so we could have had more discussion on it. I was hoping it, when I seen it on the agenda, I was thinking, why didn't this come to a work session? So we could discuss it and then give it some thought and then bring it back to a board meeting. Me, I don't like, sending out a false existing image to the public that you say, well, we are concerned, we're commissioners, we represent our people. I don't come in here and just say, well, let's hire everybody, I don't care, that's not me, I'm concerned about hiring, I'm concerned about spending tax dollars. When we do the budget, I'm concerned about the levy. I don't sit here and say, well, we gotta do this to show the public we're doing this. I hope to God we're showing that every day when we take actions here, as a board. So, I mean, I don't care if you pass it, but
But we never made a public statement as a group to those people that showed up the other night.
I was absent that day.
Well,
Randy,
I know,
sorry, so.
but we never come back out and said, you know what? We're the county board, we hear you. You sent your message very loud and clear. I agree with you, people are paying asinine prices. I have the same thing over in my area. You know, that's beyond our control. But what is within our control is our levy. And people are scared crapless right now that we're gonna tax them out of their homes. And you know what? We gotta make sure we send that message.
It's not our intent to do that, Randy, you know that.
Well, we gotta send that message. We're not gonna frickin', yeah.
Well, we'll send the message, but I'm telling you, as a commissioner, we sit here and we make those decisions, and I feel that I'm responsible for making my decisions and representing the people. I'm not gonna sit here and raise the taxes, and I think we need to raise the taxes. I don't think there's one of you that sat here and say that. I sat on the Finance and Personnel Committee, and let me tell you, I've screened the people that come in front of us. Why do you need this? Where's the money coming from? Blah, 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 and you know that. You've sat on those committees.
Yep.
So I just don't wanna send a false image out there to the people that, you know,
Right?
we're gonna freeze and then we still continue to hire. So I just have trouble with the wording.
Yeah. How would you word it?
I don't know, I want to give it more thought. I seen it on the agenda and I thought it would come to a work session first so we could talk about it and discuss it and I'd like the committees to talk about it a little more and maybe they come back with some suggestions.
Okay. All right. We can do that.
Want to table it, Randy?
Yep, we'll table it.
Okay, we'll just table that.
I would only,
more
I would make my
discussion.
suggestion that it would be brought back to the next meeting's work session, though.
We can do that. Yep. Is that okay with your table?
Yep.
And
That's-
hopefully the personnel will discuss it in committee or something.
Sure. We'll have meetings, I'm sure, in there somewhere. Correct. Yep. All right, so we'll table, sorry, to look at the number. 15.1 and bring it back to committees and then bring it back as a work session at our first meeting in June. Thank you. 16, administration.
Okay, Mr. Chair and board members, I have a board action and a resolution this morning to approve resolution authorizing Coordinator Pelzer to conduct business and accept grant funds for Phase 1 of Rock Wall on behalf of Todd County. The background for this is that Todd County has completed a conditions assessment and received construction documents for the rock wall. These were funded in part through a grant provided by the Minnesota Historical Society. The next step is to begin Phase 1 of restoration and repair of the rock wall. The estimated cost for Phase 1 is $1,011,150. The Facilities Committee met and discussed the grant match and recommends utilizing $505,575 from county funds to assist in the Phase 1 project. In order to apply for the grant, the governing body of the organization must authorize someone to conduct business and accept funds on behalf of the organization, and the pre-application for this grant are due May 20th of 2022. So the options are to approve the resolution authorizing Coordinator Pelzer to conduct business and accept grant funds for Phase 1 of the rock wall project on behalf of Todd County, or not approve, and the recommendation is to approve.
Okay, you've seen the board action in regards to the acceptance of the grant funds authorizing Coordinator Pelzer to act on behalf of Todd County. I can open it up for discussion if there's questions first.
Chair,
Yes.
we just talked about a hiring freeze. Now we're gonna spend some money on a damn rock wall.
Yeah.
So give me some suggestions on what we should do here. I am not in favor of, you know, we got a rock wall out here, yeah, it's crumbling, but the what do they call them down there at the state, Historical Society? We gotta
Historical
build it
Society.
According to their specs.
Yep.
Okay. This is costing us a big amount of money. Now, granted, the steps out front and stuff need to be repaired. That I would support a little more than doing the whole damn rock wall, but as far as I'm concerned, it can crumble now, because, Randy, you talk about the taxpayers are concerned, we got to spend some money here now.
Right?
So what do we do?
That's a good question. No, well, we have ARPA funds.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Mr.
Yeah.
That was money that we didn't even think we'd get. So there's ARPA money. So that ain't gonna cost the taxpayers any money. So goddamn spend the ARPA money. Well, it is. It's taxpayers' money all the way around.
If I could chime in, phase one is basically the front of the building.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Becker, phase one is the front of the building, the steps, the plaza area, some of the extending of the wall, and some of the stormwater
Yes.
project.
And the stormwater is what they tell us through, and we've been going through this for years already.
The first application for this process, we applied in 2018 for the conditions assessment, so it's been a couple of years working on this project.
Yeah. And we're looking for a 50% grant with this application.
Yep, we don't have to request a 50-50 match on this, but it is good to show some skin in the game when we apply for these. I mean, if we didn't have the Historical Society grants, this would be an expense that we would have, whatever we choose to do with it, however we choose to renovate and restore that, but we do have this as an opportunity, and we are part of the Historical Register.
And history has it being that we use the historical funding for the repair of this building. We are tied into the Historical Society, so we can't just
Tear
do
the
this
wall out.
rock wall on our own.
Right, that was an
So-
agreement we signed in whenever we redid the building, that it was a 20-year following the Historical Society's rules.
So if we're going to do anything with the rock wall with the front of the courthouse, it has to be done through their rules and regulations, should we say.
For restoration and repair, that's correct.
Okay.
sometimes asinine.
Oh, we don't, but that was tied in before this date and time.
That's correct.
That's okay. We talked about this extensively at facilities with very similar conversations to what Commissioner Kircher is stating, and there's a lot of different opinions and whatnot, but I think we also have the opportunity, again, to say no to this, correct? I mean, if it comes back with different amounts, we have no idea what they will award. They may award way less than this, they may award zero, we may not get nothing, so.
That's correct.
The action is still in the future. This is basically just to get the application in and trying, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. We also would have to go out through a bid process, so this is an estimate of what the costs are. This is not actually going out through that bid and getting actual costs.
Partway through the process.
Right.
Pre-application is due this coming Friday. If we want to take an opportunity to just get our application in and go through the process, the awards will be done sometime in December, and then we would know whether or not we're continuing with the project.
And then in December, we can either approve or deny it one more time.
That's correct.
Did that help, Commissioner Kircher? Did it help to know that we're just not in a process of saying yes or no yet at this point?
I'm in the process of saying no, but I know it's been a long effort to try and get this, we've been doing this for 3-4 years probably, but I just get upset over, we need to set our priorities as a board. Do we wanna fix a rock wall, or do we wanna hire dispatchers that can help save people's lives? I have a tough time with, I can't replace a wall and say I can't hire dispatchers to help save somebody's life. I really have struggled with this, guys, so, I don't mind you applying, go ahead and apply, but I'm not gonna.
But if you look at the other side though, Commissioner, if a chunk of that wall fell and killed somebody, we'd be liable.
Yeah, or hurt someone, or someone got hurt.
Yeah.
Park our cars there so they can't fall on somebody then or something.
Just saying.
It just bothers me. I'm sorry, Randy.
I know.
We should be setting our priorities.
Any further discussion? Otherwise, I'd look for a motion, however, for the moving forward of the process in applying for the grants.
Are we clear that we just applied?
We are applying.
We are applying. I'll make that motion that we continue to apply for this grant.
Okay, motion by Becker, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Newman. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I gave you a little extra time. Motion carried.
Thank you.
All right, standing reports, auditor treasurer.
Yesterday was the last day for taxes that were due, the 16th, so if I have.
Okay. Any commissioner reports?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we had an MRC meeting in Minnesota Rural Caucus last Monday, I believe. I'm concerned, and Adam just left, Doug, I was hoping he'd stay. There is a proposal coming in from some group that would cause, that we're opposed to as MRC. It's going through the legislature trying to get a bill passed that would delay permits for doing anything to do with, Randy, maybe they talked about the Sauk River, anything to do with permitting like ditch digging, anything like that would take, there'd be a 30-day delay.
Oh, I heard about that.
And we are opposed to that adamantly, so I don't know where it's at right now in the legislature, but down at the Puzzle Palace, I hope they don't pass it. Just make sure that if you hear anything about it, we are opposed to it. It would cause major issues with any permitting highway department, any of that. So, those are who they are, but have a great impact on us counties. So, we are opposed to that. So, just so you know, I think we have another meeting coming up next Monday. When does the legislature adjourn?
I thought it was this Friday. Sunday.
Sunday. I think it's this Sunday.
Okay. Well, we have one Monday anyway, again, so just so you're aware that hopefully that didn't get any legs.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Kircher, for that, because I had brought that up at the Water and Soil meeting. I'd seen that. I was House File something, so, yeah.
I have a light understanding of it also, but not detailed,
We
so.
just briefly went through it at the meeting, and I know all the counties were opposed.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Any other things, commissioners?
Being legislature and they've decided to understand about how they're gonna distribute the surplus, have you heard, did you get
I don't have that specific breakdown. There was an email that was sent out regarding that, so I can make sure that you all have that.
something out? I didn't get a chance to catch anything.
AMC sent it. Yep.
So we don't know how they're gonna distribute the surplus yet it said something about tax breaks, but I don't know.
I can forward that email. There was some detail in there about the,
I didn't see it detailed enough to elaborate on it, but I read it also, and I wasn't sure that you could even find, I suppose if you go into the actual bill,
you'd have to
maybe
read
it
the
will
bill.
say in there. Anything else?
Yeah, just thoughts and prayers go out to everybody that got damage on that storm. I'm glad I didn't hear of any casualties, so that's a good thing, so,
Todd County, there was, Stevens, there was.
yeah.
Burns had, right now, it's, young ladies in, intensive care.
Thoughts and prayers go out to them.
If I could, Mr. Chair, as long as Mike is here, and Mike, I think you and I talked before, when you send out this red alert, and it comes by our phones and it's coming through an 800 number. I don't answer a lot of them 800 damn numbers because they're usually scams. How can we change that?
No, what you can do is put it in your address of your phone. That's
put
code red,
alert.
so there'll be, actually, there's
Well,
three
it comes on
different.
my landline though.
Oh, on your landline, yeah. Unfortunately, I cannot change that. I have talked to them about that, because we've had this discussion, and then, and they're saying it's basically, it's up to the carriers, and the carriers don't wanna
But
budge
there's no
on it.
caller ID, it's just an 800 number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's the same number that they would use in Wadena also, it would be coming in as, so. Like I said, the easiest is to put those
Yeah,
numbers
it comes
in.
on my cell phone, but if you're not, someplace and you just have your landline in the house, and all of a sudden my phone rings, I'm thinking, well, what is it, who is it? So I look at it, they don't number, I don't answer it. So
Yeah, and, to also let the board members know that, we did actually use, the emergency public awareness or the, iPod system to alert people to stay out of Clarissa, so that was actually, we used, that to, park that message onto the cell phone towers, over the Clarissa area.
Anything else? Coordinators report?
Just an update regarding the event that was scheduled for tonight at Clarissa Ballroom, the rural resiliency and the opioid discussion that's been canceled for tonight and coming at a later date. I don't know that it's been specifically rescheduled, but they're saying possibly June, so.
Okay.
That's all I have.
All right. Other than that, I would look for a motion to adjourn for the month of May.
So move.
Motion by Newman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kneisel. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carried. We'll start our work. We'll call the work session to order. And first on items of the work session is the 2023 pictometry flyover discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will start this discussion out. We have been doing aerial imagery flyovers since 2008, I believe. And those flyovers assist in creating the GIS viewer that we have today. It assists all the land services offices in doing their jobs and using the data that's there for assessing, using it for planning and zoning purposes, soil and water purposes, and the imagery is very important for them to be able to complete the work that they do. So we are in year 3 of our current flight, and in 2023 we are requesting a new flight to be done. That flight will be at a cost of $130,800, and Denise, there's additional information in the packet. And there's also an option for a second flight. This is typically how this has gone for us with all of the flights that we've done. We are allowed to make these payments over the course of 3 years. We also request the 3 cities. We request Browerville, Long Prairie, and Staples if they want to take part in having imagery available to them. They, in years past, have taken part in that. They didn't with our last flyover, but we will make that request of them. The funds that we use to pay for this project have been compliance funds, so this has been 100% funded through those compliance funds and funds provided by the city. The compliance funds are used to keep the recorder's office compliant with recording, but they're also used for enhancements to technology for those land services offices. And the current balance in our compliance fund is at $292,483. So there are funds available within that account to support the ongoing flyovers that we've been doing every 3 years. And this is a flyover that would include 6-inch neighborhood. Doug, if I'm correct on that? And then in the cities, in those 3 cities that I mentioned, it would be 3-inch flyover. With our last flyover that we did, our agreement said 6-inch and 3-inch, but what they provided us was a 3-inch and a 3-inch. So we had amazing imagery at the last flyover, and that was due to COVID. We had leaf on with our last flyover because it was difficult to get that done within the early spring time frame due to COVID. So this would be 6-inch and 3-inch.
Mr. Chair, what do the cities contribute if they were to participate?
I don't have those figures specifically in front of me. It's depending on the city size. Doug, do you remember specifically how that was derived?
I do not, because they didn't do it in 2020, so last time they look back to see what we did.
If I could, Mr. Chair, the other question is, how come the number of years, how come we're doing it 3 years or not 4 years or 5 years,
Yep. So when we first did this, the flyover was in 2008, and then we flew it again in 2013, and then I think after that we flew it in 17. So each time we've had these flyovers, minus the last couple of years, we've shortened that time frame just because there is so much value in having that updated imagery, and this follows what counties around us are doing as well. 3 years seems to be that longest time frame that you would want to wait to have this flyover data.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm assuming, well, I think I know it's helpful to law enforcement, isn't it? The pictometry?
Yeah, it's embedded in our dispatch map. It's a
Right.
layer in our dispatch map so that we can see updated information such as building sites or something if we're looking
Right.
for a person on a property or something like that. So there is some benefit to us also.
And along with this, there is also a piece of the software that is an oblique, and that's only allowed usage from internal users and specific people at the city, but it provides that 3D angle to the imagery, which gives that added benefit to law enforcement, to assessment, to other offices having that 3D view. But that's not something that's provided to the public over the GIS viewer.
You had stated that this was over a 3-year pay period type situation, is that correct?
That's correct.
And this is showing, and if I'm interpreting this right, that there would be a flyover done now and then again in 3 years, is that correct? Is that what these both are showing us at 130,000?
Each flight would be 130,000. So we have an option for that second flyover. Typically, historically, when we receive these proposals, they always provide that second option, that secondary flight. But we know that prices may change between now and our next flyover, and the imagery itself, the 3-inch versus 6-inch, that technology changes.
Sure.
So they give us this price just so we wouldn't pay more than this when we sign this agreement, but we know that technology may change and the imagery may be better.
So these would be looking at the first flyover being done in 2023, is that correct? And
That's
then the
correct.
second one would be 2026 or whatever.
That's correct, if we choose
if we
to do
chose
that
to.
second.
And then my second question in regards to the funds available is you know, kind of close to the total of these, of course, but the replenishment of that fund, what replenishes that compliance fund, and how does that keep up with costs in comparison to what we're looking at here?
So that compliance fund is driven by the recorder's office and how many documents get recorded. Part of the fee for recording a document goes into this compliance fund, and that's what keeps this going.
And do you know, or would you have information showing what that past fund balance has had, you know, by using this for it? I mean, are we pushing ourselves to where we're gonna be looking at having to help fund this, or do we have plenty of?
I'm on the compliance committee.
Yeah.
These two here, the funds come in, it's always got a good balance.
It's always a good balance. Okay,
It's been a pretty stable account.
awesome. Okay.
So this is just information for you. When we're looking at a dollar amount this significant, and it's important to share where the funds are coming from, that it's not going to be a specific taxpayer fund that's paying for this. It is through a compliance fund set up for this purpose, and I would like to bring this back to board for approval. The contract needs to be approved before the end of June if we're going to move forward. So.
If I could, Mr. Chair, Chris, going back to the years, the timeline on it, is there that much difference if we go stretch it one more year out?
I am going to ask, if I may, ask the people who use this on a daily basis how important it is to keep that time frame to 3 years versus 4 versus 5.
It's a daily, it's one of the first things I open, program I open in the morning. We use it. More accurate data is better plan on that. So we're facing things that are different than. Such an important tool.
I guess my question, for the money being spent, are we better off to go with a better imagery and put it off another year? Because within the first month or the first year, you're already outdated.
We have a side-by-side comparison of the 3-inch versus 6. It was about 2 weeks ago, and the 3 to 6 is, it's definitely gonna work. Prior years we had 9, I think at one point we had a 12. When you look at the difference between the 12 and the 3,
Okay.
there's no comparison.
Want to hit it again?
Here's a
So if I could just maybe expand on that, the one on the left is 9-inch, is that correct, Doug? And the one on the right is 6-inch. So we would be getting that 6-inch. What we received over COVID was actual 3-inch, and they gave it for the same price because they couldn't do, they had to do it with the leaf on. So we had even better, but if we were gonna go to that 3-inch, that would come at a cost of like $380,000 to do that. And we talked about it a lot, like, is the 6-inch, is that going to work for what we do? And everybody said the 6-inch is good. The 6-inch is really good for the cost that it's coming in at. The 9-inch, we wouldn't want to go back to that just because, I mean, we just see so much value with having a clearer, crisper image. But we know that the 3-inch the price is still really high, and maybe in 3 years that cost is going to come down. I don't see the cost of 3-inch coming down by waiting just a year.
What you would normally see on like the pull-up one, interactive map one.
Says realtors, real estate agents?
Yes.
Anybody that wants to log on. I use it a lot.
I do too.
I like it.
So again, just providing you with that information here at a work session so you have some time to think about it and ask any other questions that you might have before it comes to board.
Any other questions, information? Okay. Anything else to present with it? Nope.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 2, staffing discussion.
I'll just start us off and I'll hand it to these two. They did pretty much all the work on it, so, we're just looking at I guess about 3+ years ago, we went to personnel to get a second dispatcher in the, dispatch center during heavy load times. It's been working for us until recently. We just, hiring part-timers is incredibly difficult. And when we do get a part-timer, they're typically employed full-time, so it's hard to get those hours in. So, those hours are already being paid through the part-time budget. We're just looking at moves some into full-time, so we'd be looking at, benefits for these people. I'll let, Sarah and Lonnie take over and kind of explain some of the call load and all that good stuff.
Okay, so the first page that was provided in the packet is just a comparison for our call volume compared to some of the surrounding counties' call volume. And then I included on the bottom what those counties actually have for dispatch staffing, so you can kind of see how it compares to ours. With the note that Douglas County, Wadena County, and Ottertail County, the way that their computer system is everything that they do, including their civil processes, their gun permits, and other similar things where in our system are handled differently, or they're in a different section of our software. Those things for those counties are actually included in this shared pool of numbers. And so those straight numbers for their counts are actually a little bit skewed as to what dispatch is doing and what it's not. So we took 3/4 of the total to account for those types of things where their dispatch isn't processing them, nor would those be things that our dispatch would be processing. So the numbers on the right are just kind of an adjusted comparison to make that a little more apples to apples when we're looking at actual dispatch call load. And then in those staffing numbers, for those that have Douglas, Morrison, and Ottertail, those that have supervisors, those supervisors don't typically work at the dispatch desk. they're there, they're available, they can come in and heavy call volume times, but it's not their day-to-day duties like it is for us.
So what does, you listed Douglas, Morrison, Wadena, and Otter Tail. What does Todd have on then?
Todd County has one, and then we have a second during that call volume time, plus then myself during the weekdays.
Second.
So generally, that second person is 2 to 10. Sometimes, like Fridays and Saturdays, we extend that till midnight. So there's a little bit of fluctuation there, but generally that 2 to 10 is at least covered. And then Monday through Friday, I'm there during the day, but acting as that second person.
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The calls for service obviously has increased, but I'm looking at, I just had it here, peak times when your calls are coming in, and it appeared to me that Friday, Saturday seems to be the highest call period.
Yes, but there's not a lot of differentiation between.
As I look from the, but I also look at the times, and the times are basically from about 6 in the morning till midnight is the heaviest call time. Midnight to 4 or 5 is pretty weak in call service.
Yeah. So. Yep, and that's where we wanted to put the priority when we added that part-time position to make sure those times are covered. But if you would look back, if we would pull stats from years back, this curve is pretty consistent from the hourly, where it starts to increase somewhere around 9 in the morning. By 1 o'clock is really our high peak time. Typically.
Depends upon moon phase too.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing is, I guess what I'd like explained to me is difficulty in scheduling and getting staff. So what do you have for staff, and what's the difficulty in scheduling?
Since she does the scheduling, I'll let her answer that.
Yep, so right at the moment, we have the 4 full-timers. And then with the addition of this power shift, so we have 5 part-timers on staff, but we have one that works Minneapolis Airport, so he typically will only pick up like 2 shifts a month. Some months he can't. We have another one that has full-time employment, so he picks up what he can, but that's generally between 4 and 5 shifts a month. We have one that retired from full-time, came back. He's starting to get to the wind-down phase, so we're not sure how much longer we're gonna have him. We have the one that we're currently paying benefits to because she's picking up the majority of the open time because she does have that flexibility to do so. And then the other one does have some other outside obligations, but she's been picking up what she can. So right now we're making it work. It's not without struggles. So there are several times, and now this upcoming month, we've got some off on medical leave and that stuff. So there are gonna be some times where I'm gonna have to fill in some of those regular shifts just because we don't have those people. And our last 3 go-rounds with attempting to hire part-time staff have not gone well at all.
And then let's say you, Sarah, you're the supervisor, let's say you want a 2-week vacation. How do you fill that?
If it's my own personal vacation, we just, they struggle because then they're alone during the day. I try, if I know, like, if I'm gonna be off for a week, I'll try and maybe have that afternoon person come in a little bit earlier in the day, say come in at noon or something, so they can at least help out some, but if there's no one, there's no one.
And then I'm looking through this and I don't find, unless I'm missing it, overtime hours in that part of your department.
And say, because of Sarah, she's done well with that. She's moved herself to cover these shifts, so we don't have a lot of overtime that we pay out.
And there's been, in the last, year, 18 months, there's been more than what we normally do just because we've had some of these shortages and there's just only so many people to go around. We try and keep it as minimal as possible, and I will pick up, and I have for years, I've picked up those shifts to try and keep that mitigated as much as we can. If we were to fill all of those open shifts with overtime, it would be it would be a pretty significant number, but we try
Impact on
and
the
keep it,
budget.
we try and keep it as close as we can.
I think last time I brought up and asked about the housing of prisoners. And I guess I'm really curious to see what we are actually making housing prisoners and not housing prisoners. Not very many other counties do. And I know Steve said that if we once leave it go, it would be impossible to get it back. But I guess I'd like to know, are we actually making money by the time we pay out our expenses? Or are we not making money?
Yeah, we're making money.
You know,
Because we'd have to have our 2 jailers there right now, no matter what. If we have 10 people in jail or 52 people in jail, we have to have 2 jailers right now. We can't go away from that unless we resize our jail, which, like Steve said before, that'll make it so we'll never get back to that 52-bed facility, which
Yeah.
is what we built it for. But we also are grandfathered in on a few things that won't come back, that won't allow us to become a 52-bed facility. So having these extra inmates is not costing as much per day, besides a hot meal and a breakfast and a supper, which is pretty minimal.
And we make $60 per day per inmate. So if we're housing 10 people, that's $600 a day we're making on those 10 inmates.
what are the other jails around charging for?
It's a straight fee.
It's a straight fee?
Statewide.
It's the same all around?
4 years ago, what was happening, we'd had sheriffs that would say, I'll take Gary's prisoner for $40
They're
to
playing
drive by
games with
these
it.
3 sheriffs' buildings, and we finally got together and said, no more of that, we're gonna put a flat rate, so we're not trying to cut each other's throats, so it went to $60 a day, and so.
Okay, so Steve, you're telling me that you gotta have the same amount of jailers if you have 10, or if we have 60?
If I have one person or 50% facility, you have to have 2 staff.
2 minimum, but
Yep.
if they increase the population, they have to have more jailers on.
If
We
can't
can't go past 52.
You can't
Right.
go back.
52, we
Yep.
gotta house them out.
Okay,
They're directed by the Department of Corrections. They
Correct.
have to-
mm-hmm.
And the reason we're housing right now is because other facilities ain't got the staff to house them. It's kinda sad.
I'm assuming you're proposing this for 23,
Correct.
and I would assume the budget committee will be who, Randy and Gary?
It's Randy and Rod,
Randy and
Commissioner
Rod.
Newman and Commissioner Erickson right now.
The-
Oh, I'm sorry, we're set for that.
Right now.
Okay, so what, I'm sorry, I was thinking ahead here.
Yeah.
So what, have you guys discussed anything about this yet?
Started, yeah,
Okay.
it starts the 2nd.
June 2nd is our first meeting for 2023.
Okay.
So we did include in the packet, there's 2 cost estimate documents. One for 2022, so that would be, for example, if we would start that mid-year here this year. So we did put the half-year included in that. So with the current salaries, with benefits for the 2022 rates, this would be the cost, and then the next page would be proposed cost for 2023. And that's where we included the note there that because we would not be filling those hours then with part-time staff, we would move part of what's already been budgeted for part-time staff into the full-time line item to try and offset some of that.
I just caution you to be careful about reducing the part-time budget, because you're still gonna have, as the longevity and seniority, as you move on, you build up more PTO, and
Yep.
then you're gonna have more people off, so.
Yep, absolutely, and
we
that's
don't-
why we cut it in half, since we're
Yeah,
anticipating
but
that half of the
I would just
amount
be
is gonna be
careful,
covered with the full-time.
because you're gonna find
Yeah.
yourself in a predicament down
Yeah.
the road, so.
Yeah, we wanna make sure that we're not reducing it too far, but then that can be reevaluated once we get a couple
Yep.
years in and kinda see what that new average is gonna be.
I guess I would like to see this go through the budget committee. You guys are starting meetings, you said in June 1st?
June 2nd, I think, is the first days. Are you guys on the
Yeah,
first
we're
day?
the first day.
Yeah.
It'll be the same committee for Personnel Committee, right?
Yeah.
So I would really like the Personnel Committee to discuss this in depth, so.
We've touched on it a little bit, but we haven't went in depth. We thought it was good to bring it here
Yeah.
at this point, and then we'll bring it back through finance a little bit and keep it moving anyways, or being looked at. I think the need is there, and if it's something that we can justify on the budget, yep. Something to work for. Any other questions? Any other things for you guys as far as presentation wise or anything?
No, just, I mean, just to stress, you know, like you said, the need is definitely there. If we were to lose, you know, for example, our retired part-time, we're gonna be struggling, and we're gonna have to come back to you guys in a month or two. You know, if he decides next week to walk out the door, that puts us in a really big bind, so, I would just, you know, ask that you do give it some careful thought, because we are behind, and it's hard for the existing staff that's there. They're doing the best they can, but, you know, for example, the other night during the weather event, there was 2 of them there, and that wasn't enough. We had to have a third person
Can't
come
keep
in.
up.
You know, they took 142 phone calls in
That was amazing.
not very long, you know, along with paging fire departments and doing those things. So we really want to make sure that they're supported too, because it is a struggle for them sometimes. So we don't want them to feel like, you know, we don't have any help, and we don't want to be here anymore either, because
Right.
we have a good group and they do a really good job, but it does get to be a lot, so.
Sounds good.
All right.
I think Dave alluded to it before too, is hiring part-time, it seems like we're just the recruiting person for Morrison, Stearns, or whatever. We get them part-time and they go, ooh, full-time job over there, and I'm already trained, and we stuck all this money into them, and away they go.
Yep.
It's a struggle.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Very much.
Yep, thanks.
All right, next we have Dr. Eric Guthrie here, from the, State Demography Center. So, I'll let him kind of take over. He's got a PowerPoint presentation. This was a request to have him come in and just kind of give us some current, as much as he can during COVID. I know Doctor said he struggled with getting some, data over the COVID years, as everybody has. So I'll let him sit down in front of the microphone and take over from here.
She'll control it.
She'll control it, okay. Some of my slides have little animations on it, so it may not look like it's clicking forward, but it'll do something. Good morning.
Good morning.
Wonderful to see you folks. Thank you very much for having me. My general preference is, if you have questions while I'm talking, please let me know what your questions are, because I find that if one of you has a question, then likely many of you have a question, and I'd like to address those, and you know, getting the most benefit for you folks is why I'm here.
Maybe we could start out with one question, because.
Absolutely.
I think, Barb and I have both have asked this. Is our census a true census with the COVID situation? So, is that an accurate question? I mean, we're just concerned that because a lot of people didn't maybe do the census, so.
There were a lot of challenges in collecting the census. The Census Bureau has told us that they closed out 99.9% of all of the cases. So what we're looking at is a census that took longer, was more expensive, and was much more difficult than any of the censuses that have been conducted in any of our lifetimes. But the census data are going to be reliable. And they are currently working on making sure that what they publish is accurate and fit for the use cases that locals have for those data. Okay. There were, as you are well aware, there were a lot of delays in the census. The census carried on for several months past the normal time frame, and those delays and carrying on longer were done to make sure that the data were collected and are as accurate as possible. With that being said, there are always issues in census, and there are always local issues in census where things may have different levels of accuracy at different places. But overall, the Census Bureau is telling us that they did a thorough and complete job and closed out nearly all of the cases. And when they're talking about closing out of cases, what they're talking about are visiting homes, and these are, when the Census Bureau has to visit a home, it means that they have made multiple mailings to a home, there has not been a response, and then they go out and physically knock on doors and make the most recent technical documentation that I read said that they made at least 6 visits to homes to try to collect those data. And even after those visits, if they were unsuccessful in collecting those data, there are other methods that they go to try to collect those data. They use administrative records, they use proxy answers, so they will ask neighbors, realtors, they will ask localities for data. So I think that that is the very, very long answer to your question. The short answer is yes, the data should be good. I have a variety of topics that I'm going to talk about today. One of them are the Census 2020 results, both for the state and for the county. I'm going to talk about diversity, and diversity is a long-term trend. Todd County is becoming more diverse, and it has been becoming more diverse for quite a while, as has the state. One thing that I just need to make clear to everybody is that demographers like myself, we're horrible people. We have to make very frank and honest statements about population change, about the way populations change, about increasing and decreasing in particular groups. And when I talk about changes in groups and composition of the population, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Generally, when I'm talking about compositional change in the population, that is usually a good thing. As I mentioned, the population is becoming more diverse. That is useful for bringing in different folks that change the population dynamics and will sort of stem some losses that have been seen or some stagnation in the population. So as we see populations grow more diverse, they become more healthy in a general sense and tend to turn around periods that may have been seen stagnation or decline. Okay, so I'm also want to talk about how populations change, because that is vital in understanding how population change is going to affect labor force dynamics, and I know that was an important something that this group wanted to hear more about, were the local labor force dynamics. Next slide, please. One more slide. These are the 2020 census results for the state overall. The state overall grew in population between 2010 and 2020. There is one group in this slide that did not increase in population from 2010 to 2020. Next slide, please. That is highlighted here in red. We can see that the persons who identify as white who are under 18 years old, the aggregate size of that population declined between 2010 and 2020. What we are looking at here is a combination of factors, and I'm going to get into a little bit more about how populations change in a few moments, but what we're seeing here are the effects of persons aging out of that under 18 population. We're seeing the effects of migration, and we're also seeing the effects of declining fertility rates. When we look at the population change for Todd County between 2010 and 2020, overall the population was relatively flat. It did increase a little bit over the period, slightly, a little bit more than 200 people. I figured it out last night and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think 260 people I think was the overall increase in the population between 2010 and 2020. There were some declines in some specific groups. Next slide. We can see highlighted in red that the white population between 2010 and 2020 did decline, as did the youth populations in the African American and the Asian communities. I do have all of the racial groups on the slide, and I'm going to display many of the racial groups throughout the presentation. I will say that the size of the populations for the groups other than the white and the Hispanic or Latina are so small that I would not necessarily draw a lot of conclusions from changes in those particular populations or some of the labor force data that I'm going to show you for those particular populations. I have a high degree of confidence in the population numbers for the white and the Hispanic groups. Size of the other populations may, the error introduced by the small population size may make them a little bit less useful. Next slide, please. Diversity is a long-term trend. When we think about diversity, we can think about diversity in a few ways. We can think about diversity of thought, we can think about diversity of opinion, but when we think about changing populations and diversity, what we're oftentimes talking about is compositional change in the population, and in a lot of the areas in Minnesota, what we're talking about is an increase in the populations that do not identify as white or non-Hispanic. What we can see here for Minnesota is that the overall change in the populations who do not identify as white, I did not put the white population on this particular graphic because were I to have done that, all the lines would have looked flat because of the overwhelming proportion of the population in Minnesota is white and has been white for a very long time. But we can see that since 1990 or so, the populations that do not identify as white have been increasing. We can see that the African American population has increased almost quadrupled in size, and the Asian and Hispanic populations have increased significantly as well. The only non-white population that has remained fairly flat in the state overall is the Native American population, although even with a flat population in a period of population increase, that means that those raw populations have increased. They just not have increased as fast as the other populations in the state, which means that their relative proportion has remained flat. Now when we take a look at the white population, next slide please, we can see that since 1990, the white population in the state overall has decreased from in excess of 90% down closer to that 80% mark, right? So again, as I stated, first off, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. Overall, this is making our population stronger because it is bringing in folks that have different levels of population momentum, which is a topic that I'll get into in a moment. But what we're talking about are people migrating in, and also migrating in with generally with different levels of fertility brought with them that is higher than what is the domestic population that they are mixing in with. Next slide, please. When we look at these same data for Todd County, we can see that with the exception of the Hispanic or Latino population, the other non-white populations have increased a little bit, but the size of the Hispanic population is far and away the gain leader in this particular graphic. So since 1990, we can see that the Hispanic or Latino population was less than 0.5% of the total population for the county, and as we have progressed to 2020, they are now constitute in excess of 7% of the population. Overall, when we look at the working age population, they are approaching that 8% mark for the population. And I have to draw that distinction because working age population is a little bit under 18. So we generally mark those at about, starting at about 15 years of age. So next slide, please. Here we can see the overall population change in the white population for the county. We can see that the declines have been less significant than they have been in the state, although still significant. So in 1990, the overall white population in the county was nearly 100%, not quite, but very near that. When I was making this graphic, I had to adjust the scale because it wanted to throw it up to 120%, and of course you can't have 120% population, so had to adjust it down a little bit. But as we progress to 2020, the white population now constitutes about 90% of the population in the county. So the population in the county has been changing over time. It has been becoming more diverse, and as we're going to talk about in the next couple of sections, that is that is a good thing that is going to poise the county for either maintaining current population levels or perhaps increasing them over time, which would be counter to some of the projections that have been produced for the county, and counter to some of the projections I'm going to show you in a moment. But next slide, please. When we think about these changes in population, as I said, Todd County has been becoming more diverse over the past several decades, and this is a good thing that will allow the county to grow as we move forward past 2020. Next slide, please. When we think about the way that populations change, there are only 3 things that can possibly change a population size. I've alluded to those 3 things. You can hit next 3 times. Those 3 things are births, deaths, and migration. Really, that's it. When we talk about population change, this is the only formula I'm going to give you, so not a lot of math in this presentation, but when we think about population change, population at time 2, so could be 2020, is equal to the population at time 1, could be 2010. To that we add births, we subtract deaths, and then we add the interactions of migration, so the ins and the outs. When we think about the differences between births and deaths, next, that is called natural change. If it's increasing, we call it natural increase, and if it's declining, we call it natural decline. Whichever direction it's going, we can call it natural change. Next, the interaction between in and out migration is called net migration. Now, well, I'm not done with that. When we are talking about natural change, this is what changes population in the absence of migration. So this is what we're going to be talking about when we talk about increasing mortality as the baby boom generation begins to feel the effects of mortality. And as we start talking about declining fertility rates, these begin to interact in a way that cause population decline. If you have increased deaths and fewer births, that starts to trend into natural decline, right? If you do not have migration to offset that natural decline, your population will begin to decline. I was working up some migration maps to try to show what migration looked like for Todd County. It got very complicated and was a little bit less useful. But just to summarize what I was seeing is we see migration into Todd County coming from some select places, coming to and from some select places generally in the south and in the west. And sometimes folks are moving to Todd County from those places, but most often they're moving to those places from Todd County. So when we look at migration for Todd County, the most likely source of in-migration is going to be other places in Minnesota. That's really the crux of what I was seeing when I was looking at those migration data, and that is not uncommon. When we look at migration, the most common type of migration is a short migration move. You're much more likely to move within a county or between a county within your own state than you are to move across state lines. The logistics, expense, and reasons for across-state moves are generally a higher bar, higher threshold to cross than are within county or within state moves. So when we look at migration, the best source of in-migrants for Todd County are going to be other places in Minnesota. With that being said, Todd County does have inflows and outflows to many places throughout the nation, and that does change over time, and the data that I am using to do those analyses are generally coming from the Census Bureau, where they are collected through survey results, and they're difficult to interpret and difficult to draw meaning from, other than to say broad conclusions like I just mentioned, that the best source for in-migrants for Todd County is going to be other places within the state and short move type migration scenarios. Next slide. These are the projections for the state of Minnesota. So as we can see, both lines, the over 18 and the 17 and under lines, are increasing. So we do project the overall population for the state to increase over time. The over 18 line is going up with a steeper slope than is the under 18 line. We expect the 17 and under line to remain relatively flat, and this may have been overestimation of what we expect to see in the under 17 age group, just because we have been dealing with declining fertility rates for quite some time, and despite what was being said in some of the popular media at the beginning of the pandemic, times of economic and social trauma, stress, however you want to frame it, do not generally produce population booms, right? So when we talk about population booms, like, for example, the baby boom, that was after a period of population stress, not during a period of population stress. So we're likely to see a continuation of declining fertility rates into the near future, and unless the millennial generation begins to realize some of their potential fertility that has not been realized to this point, these estimations of the under 17 population might be higher than what we realize moving into the future. So next slide, please. This is the projection line for Todd County. We do currently project population declines. It'll be relatively flat with minor declines for the next few years, and then as we begin to see increased mortality as the baby boom generation begins to feel those effects, we expect those may exceed births, and we may enter a period of natural decline. And in the absence of migration, that is something that is going to bring down the population. Now, as the baby boom generation ages, we also have the potential for pull factors as they leave the labor force, bringing people in to fill job vacancies that may be created. We have been talking about and have been witnessing what various media sources have described in various ways, a great resignation. Obviously labor shortages have been in the media quite a bit, and hypotheses early on were that it perhaps might have been the older generation either leaving the labor force or not coming back into the labor force after businesses began to reopen, because at certain points people do not necessarily need to be in the labor force, and they are not necessarily doing it strictly for economic gain. And so a lot of us were thinking that it might have been early retirements or folks over the age of 65 not coming back into the labor force. Some preliminary data that we've been seeing at the state and national levels, however, suggests that it is more younger folks that have not entered or re-entered the labor force following the pandemic that may be contributing to some of the labor declines that we are seeing. This is just a projection, and it may not be realized. And given the dynamics of the county, there are ways that we can see where that downward sloping line may be mollified a little bit and may be a little more flat. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a second. Next slide, please. Here we can see I've split the projections out for the over 18 population and the under 18 population for the county. And the under 18 line is declining a little bit, but not as strongly as we might expect with the declining fertility rates. But we do see significant declines in the over 18 line, and I think that those are attributable again to the aging of the population and a high proportionality of the population being in excess of 65 years of age. Next slide, please. This is, I need to talk about fertility because it is an important in understanding how population change and the composition of the population and as that changes, that may affect some of the projections and some of the long-term population positions in the state. So this graphic looks at general fertility and births for the nation over a long period of time. And we can see that large hump in the 45 to about 65 period, which was, of course, the baby boom. We can see that was the point where we had the highest numbers of births, the highest fertility rates, with the exception of some very high fertility that existed in the early part of the last century. That was as the nation was transitioning from a more agrarian economy to a more industrial economy. Now, one thing that puzzles folks sometimes is we see the fertility rate declining and remaining relatively flat, but we see births increasing and remaining relatively high. So, what is that dynamic and how does that happen? Well, the population over that period of time has more than doubled. So as you have more people coming into the population, even with lower fertility rates, you tend to get higher numbers of births. So that's kind of how that dynamic works. So if you're bringing in people, you're going to have more births, especially if you're bringing in people that tend to have higher fertility rates. Next slide, please. When we're bringing in people and we're focusing on population increases, the people that are coming in make a difference, right? We can see in this graphic that with the exception of folks that either identify as Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander or some other race, the white and white alone non-Hispanic populations have some of the lowest fertility rates on this graphic. We can see that the other group that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that is becoming a greater proportion of Todd County's population, the Hispanic or Latino population, does have a higher fertility rate than does the white population, and that is going to affect the composition of the state, of the county, and that may be an avenue to mollify some of those population losses that are projected for the county. And these are data that I have derived from the Census Bureau for the state overall, not for the county. The populations are a little bit small to be able to derive these statistics for the county overall. Next slide, please. Another thing that clearly is going to affect population growth is going to be the age of the population, right? This has multiple ways to affect the population. As your population ages, again, fertility rates are going to come down, mortality rates are going to increase. We can see that Todd County has a median age that is in the mid-40s, so meaning that half of the population is in excess of those mid-40s and half of the population is below that age. That is getting, the population's getting seasoned, right? It's getting a little bit older, and it's getting beyond its prime reproductive years. So bringing in younger people through migration is going to help Todd County into maintaining and perhaps increasing population. Next slide, please. So when we look at fertility, it has been declining for quite a while. Fertility losses have been larger in greater Minnesota, but they exist everywhere. These fertility declines are witnessed in urban areas, in rural areas, and all areas in between. Population growth is going to be dependent on migration. As our populations age, they're going to have less children, and they are going to be exiting the population through their interaction with mortality. And again, if the millennial generation begins to realize some of that potential fertility, we may see some, that may turn around a little bit, although at this point, the millennial generation's fertility has been delayed, and at the aggregate level, delayed fertility is always reduced fertility. And increases in population are going to be seen more in places that are going to be welcoming to new Minnesotans. The reason being is when we think about people moving to Minnesota, when people move, they tend to move in the younger age groups. They tend to move in either when they have families or when they're going to be having families. And so places that are welcoming to those people that are coming in are going to be better poised to be seeing population increases and are better poised to take advantage of not only the migration component of population change, but also the fertility component of population change. And one of the most valuable types of migration that an area can witness are going to be people that are coming in from other countries. International migration is going to be extremely valuable because typically people that are coming in from other places are entering the U.S. from areas that have higher fertility rates. Higher fertility rates tend to persist through the first generation, into the second, and then by the third generation begin to adopt the fertility rates of the dominant population in the area to which they moved. Next slide, please. Now, this graphic is called a population pyramid, and I want to show you the interaction of all three of those components of change, births, deaths, and migration on Minnesota's population over time. The value of this type of graphic is not the individual placement of any individual bar. There are 86 bars on each side, so we're talking about 172 data points. Trying to glean meaning from individual bars is not particularly useful. This type of graphic is really meant to look at the overall population structure. What we can see here in 1990, Minnesota's population had a wide bulge in that 25 to 45 year age group, which was the baby boom population. We could see that there was another bulge in the under 15-year-old population, which represented the children that the baby boomers were having. These would have been the millennial generation. My generation is right in the middle in the wasp-waisted part of that graphic, the Generation X, which nobody cares about or talks about anyway, so we'll just move on from that. If you hit next once, that'll set this graphic in motion, and we can see how population changes over time with the effects of birth, deaths, and migration. We can see that proportionally the baby boom generation has gotten a little bit smaller, and there has not really been a bulging out of other populations. We can see that actually the millennial generation, as a proportion of the state overall, has come in a little bit. We can attribute that to the effects of more population coming in behind them, but also some migration effects. What we can also see is that flattening out of the sides of this graphic at the bottom, which are showing sort of a lack of population momentum, and especially that narrowing at the very bottom, we can see the effects of declining fertility rates. Okay, if you hit next twice, we can look at the population structure for Todd County. This is Todd County in 2020. I'm not going to show you the graphic in motion just because it takes me a very long time to put those graphics together. But also, I want to talk about the population structure in 2020 and make some comparisons that I think will be valuable. We can see that the population of the baby boom generation is beginning to cross that 65-year mark, potentially beginning to leave the labor force and creating some of those labor shortages and the potential for pull factors for migration that may pull some additional folks into this state, into the county, either from other parts of the state, other parts of the nation, or other parts of the world. We can also see, in contrast to the state graphic, we have a bit of a wider base at the bottom of the graphic. I'm going to attribute some of that widening of the base to the increasing Hispanic or Latino population in the state. They appear to have, not in the state, in the county. They appear to have a higher fertility rate, as we're going to see on the next slide. Now, small populations don't make pretty population pyramids, so they get a little bit wonky because of the differences in size in individual bars. We can see some bars, especially at the top, don't have any population in them. That's normal for relatively small populations. This population is under 2,000 people, so that's why it looks a little bit like this. But we can see it has a very, very wide base, okay, which is going to denote a higher fertility rate. Okay, I did try to smooth this out a little bit so you could better see the overall structure. If you hit the next slide, we can see I put in some moving averages to try to highlight the structure a little bit. Still a little bit hard to see, so if we go to the next slide, we can see that structure a little bit better, and we can see that the base of the population of the Hispanic or Latino population is quite wide, denoting a rather high fertility rate. Something interesting also is it is a little heavier on the male side of the population, which I don't have data to back this up, but when we see this sort of dynamic on a population pyramid, that typically is going to be happening in places where we're going to see staged migration. Oftentimes, male family members will move to an area where they're able to obtain employment first, and then bring their families once they have settled and are able to afford to make that sort of move happen. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the Hispanic or Latino population, it's shown significant growth over the decade and prior. We've seen that growth back to 1990. The Hispanic or Latino group is going to be very important for helping to keep the population and population growth healthy over the coming decades, and may potentially prevent some natural decline, or at least lessen the effects of that natural decline as the baby boom generation begins to, using my favorite euphemism, feel the effects of mortality. With higher fertility rate that we've seen in the population structure for the Hispanic or Latino population, we can say that there's going to be some population momentum moving forward as that population moves up into the childbearing years. They're likely to continue to have a wider base, at least for a few decades as we move into the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've droned on about population characteristics and population change because I think it's very important for understanding some of the labor force dynamics and how those are going to be realized as we move forward. The population characteristics and labor force dynamics that I'm going to be showing you are from the 2019 American Community Survey. I'm sorry that they're a little bit dated. There are data that are from the 2020 American Community Survey 5-year estimates, but the way that these estimates are produced is that 5 years worth of data are pooled. So there was significant problems in collecting the 2020 data. And so even were I to have shown you the 2020 data, 60% of the data that would have been used to make those estimates would have been exactly the same as the data that I'm going to show you because of the way that the estimates are produced.
Can
Yes,
I
ma'am.
ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Out in rural Todd County,
Yes, ma'am.
we see a lot of the Amish. And how do you count if they have children or if they're having children, if they're not going into hospitals to do childbirth? Are they not counted in this?
Typically, even births that are, I'm going to answer that there's a few different points I need to hit on that particular topic. It's an interesting topic. Thank you very much. Typically, even if a birth occurs outside of a hospital, a birth certificate is still required. And birth certificates are what our birth data are what we get from the state to do our projections. So some of the lines that you saw earlier are where I was talking about population projections. For the census, however, those are not dependent upon whether or not a birth occurred in a hospital, or even if that birth is officially recorded in administrative records, because the Census Bureau sends out requests for information to households, and if households don't respond, they get a physical visit and knock on the door to find out how many folks are living there. So they're not the Amish population's representation. The data would not be dependent upon them being represented in the population that is being born in hospitals.
Okay. Then as we go into workforce with the Amish population, we see a lot of them leaving the Amish communities. Are they counted as, on the graph, as white then?
If
you know?
Yeah, it's when we think about the Amish population, they typically are variants of German descent, and those populations would be considered white.
But you categorize the other ones out, and so if you're counting them, they're
part of the white population. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions before I move into the labor force data? Oh, okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so first primary statistic when we start talking about labor force data is generally labor force participation and unemployment. When we talk about labor force participation, we're talking about something very specific. We're talking about people who are either employed or who are looking for work, right? So people who are not looking for work and not employed are not considered to be participating in the labor force. And they would also not be represented in the unemployment statistic, because the unemployment statistic is also talking about people who are actively seeking employment. Okay, so it does not include people who are retired and not working and not seeking employment. They would not be represented in either of those statistics. When we look at the labor force participation rate, we can see that I mentioned that small populations are causing a little bit of a problem in these data. So in the next slide, I've kind of grayed out the populations that, next slide please, thank you. The populations that for whom I consider the data to be reliable are going to be the white and the Hispanic or Latino populations. For most of the populations, for the other groups, we're talking about under 100 people, and the statistics I just would not put a lot of confidence behind those statistics. However, for the white and for the Hispanic population, I think that they're fairly reliable. The Hispanic or Latino population is participating in the labor force at a higher rate than is the white population. They do show a higher unemployment rate, but that would make sense with higher labor force participation, right? Because we're talking about people who, when we talk about participation, we're talking about people who are either employed or who are looking for work, right? So we can see that as far as those folks coming into Todd County, they are coming in and they are actively participating in the labor force to a very, very high degree. This would also indicate a difference in the median age in the two populations, between the white population and the Hispanic population. This would tend to point to the Hispanic population being younger. than the white population. Next slide, please. When we look at the industries that folks that live in Todd County work in, we can see that manufacturing is the highest, which in excess of a quarter of the folks in Todd County work in some flavor of manufacturing. Next would be healthcare or social assistance is what the full name of that category is, followed by retail trade. And I had, for space sake, I shortened accommodation and food service to hospitality. Construction comes in at just over 5%, and then all of the other categories are below 5%. All the categories except for the other category constitute about 97% of the population in Todd County, as far as the residents of Todd County. Now, with that being said, we do know that people both work in other counties, and people who work in other counties also come into Todd County. So when we look at residents that are both living and working in Todd County, that's about 4,500 people. And then we have folks that are both coming in and leaving the county for employment as well. I have those numbers of folks that are coming in and leaving in my notes, but those are on the slides. I don't have those in front of me right now.
Where does government fall in there?
Public administration is where government falls in, and I shortened that category. That might be an other. I don't have a pen on me, but I will.
I just was curious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's going to be likely in the other category, but I will find out and send that answer when I send the slides. Next slide, ma'am.
Would government then also encompass schools and whatnot, or where do that kind of things? I mean, does that all fall?
Generally, if we're talking about public schools, those fall under public employment. Okay. If we're talking about private schools, those fall outside of government employment. So if you have, for example, religious schools, seminaries, any of those types of schools, those would not be in public employment, but your local elementary school would be. Okay. Next slide, ma'am. Now, educational attainment is very important when we talk about the availability of a qualified workforce. So we can look at the educational attainment of the population by sex. We can see up to the point of being high school graduates, the male population accomplishes that measure at a higher rate than does the female population. Everything beyond that, however, with the exception of graduate degrees, where those are fairly flat and there's no significant difference between males and females. I believe the males on that line are 3.5% and the females are 3.4%. So nothing, you can't distinguish that from a 0% difference. All the other groups, the females are achieving higher levels of educational attainment. So some college associate's degree, bachelor's degrees, and in the bachelor's or higher category as well. And that follows a long-term trend of higher levels of participation in higher education by the female population. Next slide, please. Median earnings by educational attainment is no surprise that generally the higher higher education one attains, the more they earn. Those gains are realized more by males than they are by females, and that is something that I do not think that anybody in this group is going to be surprised by. But knowing something intuitively versus having data to back it up, I think is an important thing. So, next slide. When we look at educational attainment by race, and by sex, and race or ethnicity, I only included the white and Hispanic or Latino populations in this graphic because the other populations did not have significant enough populations to be statistically valid. what we can see here is that females are exceeding the rates of educational attainment, exceeding the rates of male educational attainment, excuse me, and the white population is graduating from high school at a higher rate, but the rates of bachelor's degree are higher for Hispanic and white females are fairly similar. So that's an interesting statistic. I thought that would be valuable. Next slide, please. Those are the data that I have. I've taken a few more minutes than 45 minutes, but if the group has any questions, I would welcome those at this point.
Any questions, commissioners?
Good information.
Wonderful.
Good information. Thank you.
Thank you. Please let me know if I could be of any further assistance.
These slides will be available.
I will send them this afternoon as soon as I get back to the office.
Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Anything else? Otherwise, we will end the work session for May 17th, 2000.